Hi, my name is Andrew Geyer, and I'm talking today about milk, specifically my claim that milk consumption fails to improve the health of the average adult consumer. Now, when I refer to milk, I'm specifically referring to milk collected from cows, goats, and other domesticated animals, and not breast milk, soy milk, almond milk, and that type of thing. You've probably heard in media and ads that milk is good for you, it improves your bones, and it makes you healthy. I'm here to question that opinion. Milk is not important for adults, it does not strengthen your bones, and it can actually contribute to obesity. Now, my first point is that the dietary benefits of milk end once a person has left infancy. You've also probably heard that breastfeeding is important for child development, and I'm not questioning that. There's a lot of research to suggest the fats in milk are very important to a child's early brain development. However, no other mammal consumes milk past their early childhood. At some point they reach the weaning period, which is the period in which an animal's diet changes from one based on milk to one based on solid foods. And at that point, they're no longer considered to be infants. The fact that humans consume milk past that stage is unnecessary, and it does not aid in any further development in your adult life. My second point is that milk does not strengthen your bones. There is no significant relationship between milk consumption and bone strength. First off, there are studies that do show that milk can improve your bone mineral content. However, the question is, does that actually correlate to bone strength and reduction of fracturing, which is what's important, which is most often the claim. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2007 found pooled results from randomized controlled trials show no reduction in hip fracture with calcium supplementation, and an increased risk is possible. A follow-up to this study, published in the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research in 2011, found that there was no overall association between milk intake and hip fracture risk in women, but that more data is needed in men. And earlier this year, published in January in JAMA Pediatrics, a study found that greater milk consumption during teenage years was not associated with a lower risk of hip fractures in adults. In general, it doesn't necessarily hurt your bones, but it also does not help prevent fracturing. My first 2 points were about how milk is not necessarily good for you. My third is how it can potentially be bad for you. Milk's high calorie content contributes to nationwide obesity. Heart disease is often cited as one of the leading causes of death in the US, according to the American Heart Association. In 2010, cardiovascular disease still accounted for 31.9% of about 2.5 million deaths, or 1 in every 3 deaths in the United States. In case you didn't know, diets high in fat, sugar, and calories are most often cited as the high contributors to cardiovascular disease and obesity. Milk contains high amounts of fat, sugar, and calories, which makes it strange that people encourage us to drink milk. There is no reason to encourage milk drinking. In conclusion, milk is important for infants, but as an adult, it's not necessary. It really hasn't been shown to improve your bone strength, and it can actually lead to obesity. I'm not saying that you should never drink milk. This morning, for example, I had cereal and I drank it with milk because that makes sense and that tastes right. It's similar to the pizza analogy. Pizza is not healthy for you, but that's not a reason not to eat it because it still tastes good. It's more like soda. It's high in calories and you should limit your intake of it. The issue with milk is not its general consumption, is that we act that it's healthy and then eat too much. Thank you.
All right, Andrew, the proposition is very clearly stated at the beginning of the speech, and I do think that you do a little bit of background trying to explain why there's a controversy here, because people are predisposed to believe that milk is important to their diets, and so you set that up reasonably well. The contents of the speech are previewed at the beginning, but the preview does go by pretty quickly, and it's not highlighted as distinctly as it could be. In the body of the speech, though, you did a very good job signposting those secondary points. So as you got to each one of them, you did indicate where we were in the speech, and I appreciated that. I thought you did a good job on those sorts of things. I do think that there are some assumptions built into the speech. The primary assumption, especially on the second point, is that hip fracture is the only measure of bone strength or bone advantages or need for calcium, and I'm not sure that that is, in fact, the case. It may, in fact, be the prime measure. I don't know that medical groups use that as their primary measurement of bone density or health, but certainly the desire to reduce that is important. I thought you did a good job citing specific evidence to address that issue, but there are other questions about bone density and osteoporosis and a whole variety of issues that might be related to this subject that I'm not sure you have covered as well as you could have. And by the way, one of your studies suggested that more research was needed on men. It dismissed it for women, but not necessarily for men. So there's quite possible a follow-up study that either addresses that issue from your perspective, or that the response speaker will be looking for data for their position on that. You cited the studies very clearly. There's some factual data that gets presented in the speech that doesn't really get any source citation on it. I don't doubt that milk has a fairly high level of fats and a fairly high amount of sugars in it, but the proportion that it represents in the average diet needs to be illustrated in some way to show that your third point really is a valid point there. Otherwise, it's a big inferential leap that you're making on that's a little bit problematic. The pacing is occasionally a little awkward, but I did think you tried to speak to the audience, and it was easy to follow you, so you're very clear when you're speaking. All right. Thank you very much.